Welcome back to the channel.
I sit on the other side of the fence to you on this. I profoundly disagree with much of what you've argued on this. But is it? I'm interested. Is it your view that, for example, a man who says he's a woman, self-identifies as a woman, is it your view that that person is a woman?
Self-ID is the kicker, isn't it? It really is the kicker. Do you believe that the declaration is sufficient to trust that person has changed sex? Or do you recognise this is a load of ascientific nonsense?
As a woman, is it your view that that person is a woman?
I think that in the case of a prison, sometimes what
generally. Just put prisons aside. If a man says I'm a woman, I identify as a woman, would you regard that person as a woman?
I think my definition of woman is what society would generally see as a woman. So
the ultimate in patriarchal mansplaining is to say to women, and bearing in mind there is a woman sitting there, Arlene Foster, to say to a woman that a woman is defined by what society recognises as a woman. So if you're old, if you're disabled, if you're ugly, if you have a facial disfigurement, if you have a scar, if you're basically invisible to the male gaze, which means everybody over the age of 40, you're no longer a woman. Because what he's got in mind is some kind of slim, pretty 20-year-old. Most women don't look like that. Even if those of us that look like that at that age don't stay that age, you know?
I think my definition of woman is what society would generally see as a woman. So I think that the experience of women tends to be the case that if someone's walking down a street, right, and gets catcalled, that person is seen by society as a woman. Many trans people experience that.
Catcalling, hate it, obviously. All women hate it. Thing is, a lot of trans women don't hate it. Paris Lees wrote an entire article in Vice about how it was very validating. These responses are not similar to the responses that other women have to catcalling. Why is that? What could be the difference? It's very thunky, isn't it?
Women tends to be the case that if someone's walking down a street, right, and gets catcalled, that person is seen by society as a woman. Many trans people experience that, and indeed many women who were born women as well experience that.
So you don't necessarily agree that just because someone identifies as a woman, that the law and society should automatically treat them as women?
No, I think that sometimes this leads to the extreme and quite ridiculous examples of someone who changes nothing about how they look, how they present, how they whatever.
Again, it comes back to what Mr. Harwood finds attractive, because he's claiming that somehow the internal gender feelings of somebody that has not changed anything about their appearance is not legitimate, whereas the internal gender feelings about someone who has decided to shave off their beard, wear women's clothes and call themselves Mary is legitimate. There is no difference between those two individuals apart from a couple of weeks. That's the only difference. If trans women are women and have always been women, then what you've just said is incredibly transphobic. Don't worry though, you're a bloke. You won't suffer any kind of fallout from saying transphobic things on TV.
My view rests on how people present, and presentation and therefore societal acceptance.
So what would
follows.
be the definition, in your mind, what would be the definition of the word woman?
I think that a woman is someone that society views to be a woman. I don't think...
It rests on how people present. That's right. You're only a woman if Mr. Harwood finds you attractive. Otherwise, get out of the club. The fact that you've had 6 children means nothing. If you're not attractive to Mr. Harwood, you don't count.
What would be the definition, in your mind, what would be the definition of the word woman?
I think that a woman is someone that society views to be a woman. I don't think it's a particularly difficult...
So it has no objective biological meaning, it's simply what we believe that person to be. It's not...
The definition of women, it's really simple. Actually, you can buy these from Kelly J. Keen's shop, and I recommend them. I wear it often. The definition of a woman is an adult human female. No more, no less. That's it. That's all you need to know. And by cleaving to reality, you avoid muddying your brain with all of this cotton wool nonsense about people presenting and bearded women in prison and all of that kind of absolute gibberish that this guy has come out with. Because really, come on. Come on.
I think that a woman is someone that society views to be a woman. I don't think it's a
So
particularly
it has
difficult...
no objective biological meaning. It's simply what we believe that person to be. It's not rooted in any science. It's about public perception.
Well, I
think that's where we disagree.
And your position seems illiberal to me, because it turns out then that a woman is what a lot of other people think.
Well, I think that it's peculiar to think that we should check someone's chromosomes to then see how we should interact with that person.
The chromosomes thing. As if you can't tell by looking at someone within a split second. Within a split second, because we've evolved the capability to recognise whether humans are male or female. It's been important to us. Evolution has selected for that ability. It is ingrained in all humans. Occasionally we may make a mistake, occasionally we may need a correction, but by and large I would say 99% of the time we are bang on the money. From the back, from the front, from a distance, from close up, just looking at your hands, just looking at your skull size, just looking at you next to a woman, we can see what's going on. We can all see. It's a nonsense. It's a nonsense. These people are trying to tell us that we should believe nonsense. It's ridiculous.
You check someone's chromosomes to then see how we should interact with that person. Everyone might have met trans people in an everyday life and not realised that they were trans. Most trans people spend a lot of effort trying to assimilate.
I'm going to tell a joke. How do you know if someone is trans? You might not know. You might see trans people all day and not know. How would you know? Of course, the answer is they'll tell you. Don't you worry about it. They'll let you know. That's just a joke. I mean, you know, you can see and hear. You can infer from social behaviours, but, you know, it's just a joke.
Trying to assimilate in that way.
No, sure, but that doesn't necessarily... So, for example, I'm in my 40s now. I might have a part of my brain that feels 21, and I might want to live the life of a 21-year-old, and I might like the law and society to treat me as a 21-year-old. But I dare say that if I said to you, Tom, I feel 21, I want you to treat me as a 21-year-old, you'd probably laugh at me, wouldn't you?
Yep.
Do you see how he's laughing there?
40s now, I might have a part of my brain that feels 21, and I might want to live the life of a 21.
He's laughing at the idea that this other bloke could self-identify as 21 when he's clearly a man in his 40s. How ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But a grown man in his 40s claiming to be a girl, a teenage girl, that's the greatest civil rights movement of our time. These people know that they're telling you lies. They know they are trying to manipulate you. They are trying to make it such that the social control of peer pressure and pressure that's actually coming from a very small liberal elite with luxury beliefs can be compelled in every person in the country. We have to stand up and say, no, that's patently false. It's patently ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that is...
So what's the difference?
There is a significant difference here, and that is that through every society, through millennia, the human experience has found people, a very small proportion of people, and I think it's right that we emphasise here in this conversation just how small a proportion of people we're talking about and how...
This trope, the historical representation of trans people. Okay, trans is a modern artefact. It's a cultural artefact that comes from the modern age. Okay, so before John Money decided to define gender, and bearing in mind John Money abused children for a living and wrote papers about it, the tragic Reimer twins, that's where gender identity comes from. It's from the institutionalised child abuse of some boys. Before him, we had transvestites, and we had cultural representations around the world of people that fit in with a slightly different way of being. They were often homosexual people within a society that didn't recognise that as legitimate unless you claimed a special label. But being trans, which still has no definition in law, has only existed in the very, very postmodern era. It's only been commonplace in the UK this century. I mean, this is not true. There is not a historical record of trans people going back and back and back. I mean, so occasionally they'll bring up things like Hatshepsut, the pharaoh of Egypt, who was female. You know, who was a pharaoh because kings hold power, pharaohs hold power. If you're going to be female and rule, you have to declare yourself a pharaoh. It's not an identity. It's not saying I'm a man. It's saying I'm going to rule this country. Therefore, I'm pharaoh. You know, Joan of Arc putting armour on was a symbol of Christian purity, of impenetrability, literally as a virgin, of being in contact with the spiritual and separate from the physical realm. It was not a declaration of identity. She was very clear that she was a woman. She was very clear about that. She was not a man, just because she felt compelled to go on this spiritual journey that involved inspiring troops throughout France. These are lies. These people are saying lies. Don't fall for it.
Has found people, a very small proportion of people, and I think it's right that we emphasise here in this conversation just how small a proportion of people we're talking about and how ridiculous it is that often this debate blows up into being such a significant political issue, because it is about a very small number of individuals.
The reason this is a significant political issue is not because of the size of a population of people who claim a trans identity. The reason this is a significant political issue is that 51% of the population are affected by that tiny minority. We are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to the other 49% of the population. So when our sex-segregated spaces, single-sex services, all of the protections that we fought for are removed and made unisex so that predators can get access to prey, you're damn right we're going to speak up about it. You're damn right we're going to make a fuss. How dare you? How dare you?
The human experience has found people, a very small proportion of people, and I think it's right that we emphasise here in this conversation just how small a proportion of people we're talking about and how ridiculous it is that often this debate blows up into being such a significant political issue, because it is about a very small number of individuals. But across every society, throughout the annals of human history, there have been people who are transgender, who have sought to change their own way in which they live life. And this is just a fundamental of the human experience.
If there were to be a Tom Harwood law, what would it say on this matter?
I really don't want there to be more laws.
He doesn't want there to be any more laws. Honestly, what's the difference between this guy and idiots on Twitter saying, well, the solution is to abolish prisons? You need to have laws because some people break laws. The vast majority of people self-regulate and don't actually ever need to come into contact with laws or the legal system. But it's there to catch the people that do need to be told, no, you can't murder people. No, you can't steal someone's life savings. No, you can't abuse children. These things are against the law. We don't allow them in our society. They are not appropriate behaviours. We discourage it. It's entirely appropriate to have laws about what you do with perpetrators of crimes. Honestly, the dishonesty. I mean, he's just basically saying, I think everyone should be let out on the street. And if they do have to be incarcerated, at least incarcerate them with a good-looking 20-year-old woman. Jesus.
And this is just a fundamental of the human experience.
If there were to be a Tom Harwood law, what would it say on this matter?
I really don't want there to be more laws. I think that one of the big problems in this debate, and some of the people that agree with me in terms of I think that society should be more accepting towards trans people, sometimes they jump on the legislative bandwagon, and you've had horribly illiberal laws in places like Canada that have mandated how people should use pronouns. I think that that is horribly illiberal and anti-individualist.
So I'm very grateful that Tom Harwood recognises that compelling speech and compelled pronouns is something that we don't want to have. So we agree on that. So we found some common ground. That's great. Let's build on from that. In the same way that women shouldn't be compelled to use pronouns, I contend we shouldn't be compelled to share intimate spaces with people with a penis when we're incarcerated. How about that? How about that?
I think that one of the big problems in this debate, and some of the people that agree with me in terms of I think that society should be more accepting towards trans people, sometimes they jump on the legislative bandwagon, and you've had horribly illiberal laws in places like Canada that have mandated how people should use pronouns. I think that that is horribly illiberal and anti-individualist. And I'm coming to this from an individualist point of view. I think that basically what we need to do is foster a greater understanding in society and be more polite in general.
Would you expect my 11-year-old daughter, if she were changing in a sports centre and a biological man walked in but identified as a woman, would you expect her to remain in that changing room because she should treat that person as a woman?
The Staniland question. It's a key issue, and to get someone to actually say where they stand on this is really important. So, you know, our thanks are due to Helen Staniland for formulating and modifying this question over hundreds of conversations. But that's the crux, isn't it? If we're going to remove these women-only spaces, such that girls are expected to share with adult males when they're vulnerable because they're undressing, where they have an expectation of privacy and dignity, and that's now removed, is that something that that you go for? Yes or no? Does an 11-year-old girl have to see penises when she's getting changed to go swimming? Yes or no?
Would you expect my 11-year-old daughter, if she were changing in a sports centre and a biological man walked in but identified as a woman, would you expect her to remain in that changing room because she should treat that person as a woman?
I don't know what you mean there by a biological man, because...
I don't know what you mean as a biological male. Right. You're lying. You're lying. I don't believe for a second that this Tom Harwood doesn't know the difference between men and women. I guarantee that he understands the difference. Absolutely guarantee. These people are expecting you to repeat lies because that is a form of social control. If they can get you to repeat lies, they can do anything. You must stand up.
I don't know what you mean there by a biological man, because there's actually some really interesting research.
You don't know what I mean by biological man?
Well, so for example, what do you
do?
No, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Do you mean someone who? Do you mean someone that looks like you, that walks in with a big beard and whatever? I think that would be peculiar.
Think everybody watching this programme will know what a biological man is.
Right. So, for example, there's a situation whereby in changing rooms and in bathrooms, we've seen masculine lesbian women who might have hairy armpits and whatever be forced out.
The lesbophobia. How dare he? Hairy lesbians are being forced out. No, they're not. Lesbians are welcome to change in female changing rooms. They always have been. They always have been. And that's where they've always got changed. Because we're all women. Lesbians don't represent a sexual threat to women in changing rooms. We know. These are lies. These are lies.
And in bathrooms, we've seen masculine lesbian women who might have hairy armpits and whatever be forced out because people feel uncomfortable, whereas trans women tend to not be forced out.
Tom and Paul, we're going to have to end it there. And
we'll go to the
I think
pub
the difficulty is there's been a mismatch between gender and sex, and for me, that's the big difference. If people want to identify as a certain gender, that's a matter for them, but that does not make them an adult female.
I'm really pleased that we've had this discussion. I invited you on. I feel half-educated. I'd like you to complete it another day.
Lo and behold, Arlene Foster is allowed to actually state at the end there that sex and gender are not the same thing and that they shouldn't be mistaken for each other. Absolutely right, Arlene. As you know, as a woman, our biological sex is really significant in our lives. Gender is a series of social stereotypes, and what we actually need is to abolish all expectations for everybody so that we're all free to adopt the dress, the mannerisms, the makeup, the accessories that we want to. That we can all engage in whichever hobbies and interests actually interest us. I mean, honestly, if men could give up male violence, I would happily share knickers with them. I mean, not my own knickers, but in general. You know, you can go out and buy your own women's knickers anytime. No one's stopping you. You can do that. You don't have to call yourself Mary to do it. And throughout history, men have cross-dressed because it's a paraphilia. Men have paraphilias. That's another video in itself, isn't it? Thanks for watching this video today. Please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. You can leave me a like or a dislike. Please share this video, and I'll see you again soon.